Welcome back to Core Anesthesia. Whether you are a student prepping for tests and boards or a CRNA here to earn CEUs, we are glad you've joined us. For more about us, make sure to check us out on Instagram at Core Anesthesia and online at coreanesthesia.com.
Welcome back to Core Anesthesia. I'm Cole here with Tanner, and today we want to do a discussion regarding the transition from being an SRNA to a CRNA. And what does that look like in terms of just one, you've taken a couple months off of school, you passed your boards, and now you have to shake off the rust and get back into the groove of doing anesthesia again. But now you're settled into a new environment at a new facility. They may do things differently if you're going to a facility that's not in the same area you did school at. They may use different types of methods for anesthesia. As we know, anesthesia is just as much of an art as it is science, and things can be done differently at different places. You now have a lot more responsibility, as now you are the one that is piloting the anesthesia. You're not just a co-pilot, if you will. And so there's a lot of changes that can occur in those first couple of weeks to months, starting your practice as a CRNA. And so we really want to just focus on that transition. What are some things that we went through as we transitioned from a student into the CRNA role? What are some tips or advice that we would give you, but also things that maybe we would do differently next time? Because it is a big transition. It's something that we think is worthy to talk about.
I think to start, let's just talk about our experience. And Cole and I had a little bit different of experience. We both trained at the same school, obviously, and then I moved out of state to start at a new practice, a practice that I, had done my research and obviously went there and interviewed, met everybody. There's only so much that you can tell about a practice before you actually get there. And then Cole, he ended up taking a position at one of the places at one of the clinical sites that we went to. So we'll both kind of talk about what that experience was like for us. But for me, I think that this was kind of a culture shock when I went to a new facility. And something that we wanted to talk about at first was something that we both experienced, regardless of having been to the hospital or not, was this sense of inadequacy or feeling like when you showed up, you really needed to prove to the other providers that you knew what you were doing, or that, especially being new right out of school, you just felt like you had something to prove when you showed up. And I think that was a pretty big struggle for me, at least initially. I talked to some of the other providers who were new grads, and they kept saying, it'll get better, it gets better. Because honestly, the first week or two, I thought, oh my goodness, what did I do? Did I really spend 3 years of my life going to school for this? It was so stressful. I was not sleeping well. I was, every night doing even more prep for the next day's cases than I did in school. There was so much pressure and stress involved that I think, especially for the first couple of weeks, I just thought, oh man, I hope I didn't miss this. I hope I didn't spend this amount of my life preparing for this. And then this is what the rest of my life looks like in a work environment that is, this stressful. And I think it took a lot of time. Cole, I don't know if I think that was pretty similar for you. And I am only, 2.5 months in now, and things are starting to slow down a little bit. But other providers that I talked to at the place I'm working at said usually it takes about 6 months to really, really settle in and get a good feel for the work.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm about 3 to 3.5 months now. And definitely the first couple of weeks for me was the same feeling. I mean, you take those couple months off after you graduate. And I mean, both of us took our boards the very first week after we graduated, so that we didn't really have that time of studying for a month or so. I mean, we took our boards, finished it, and not going to lie, I dropped my books off and did not look at a thing for weeks on end. I mean, I enjoyed the couple of weeks that I had earned. That in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm going to spend time with my family now. I have just dedicated 3 years of my life. I think you, Tanner, are the same way. I mean, we went on trips, we enjoyed the holidays, etc.
Didn't even think about anesthesia.
And then all of a sudden you realize your start date's getting closer, and you're like, man, what's the steps for induction again? What drug dosage do I like? I mean, literally the basic things I had to kind of replay in my head the week before I started clinical or started my job, because you just haven't done it, for a couple months. You get back into the OR, and I was told by a lot of people, it's just like riding a bike. You put your hand on that bag, and the first time you do that, it just comes back to you. And it really does. The first time I got in there and I gave my propofol, it just comes back to you. I mean, you've done it for 3 years, for the most of us, about 3 years of school. And you every day for those last couple of months, you were doing this multiple times a day, and it does come right back. But the weeks leading up to starting, I took about 2 months off, and I'd say the 2 weeks leading up to starting, I started to have that feeling of, I don't think I remember enough to do this. And I worked at a place that you only have a couple hours of orientation just to show you around, and then you get thrown right into your own room. And it made me nervous to think, do I remember all the little nuances that can happen and what I need to do? And I mean, Tanner, you took a little bit longer of the time off, and I think the feeling is the same there as well.
Yeah, I mean, it took a while for me to get my credentials out of state. And that's something that I wish I would have done differently, is since I knew I was going to be going out of state, I wish I would have gotten my RN license, in my third year of school, because then half the battle of getting all of that, all the credentialing wasn't with the hospital. It was getting my fingerprints through to the nursing board and getting all of that set up. So I honestly had like 4 months off just because credentialing took that long for me to get set up. And like the first day when I showed up, so the first case I remember I walked in, and the facility that I'm working at, they use sucks to go to sleep for everyone. And then to get them relaxed, they use VEC, which I used VEC, I think, one time in school. And then they use neostigmine and glyco when you're reversing, which I'm mostly used to using Sigamidex. I think I use neo and glyco less than 10 times throughout the whole school. So I walked in, it's your first day, you feel nervous. This is your first case. Pull out the meds, and I'm like, I already feel like it's, you're trying to shake off the dust. And then, I'm like pulling out Vargo real fast, and I'm like, okay, what's the dosing for VEC? I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing for this. And I'm trying to, you're already feeling, a little bit scattered. And I think that was just more so for me, just because the way they practiced was so different. But, and again, I think that goes back to the feelings of inadequacy. It's your first day. I don't want them to see me using Vargo and think, who is this guy? Like, does he know what he's supposed to be doing? Does he? And so then all of a sudden you're trying to prove that you know what you're doing, and you're trying to, I think then you probably don't ask for help quite as easily, because you want to look like you know what you're doing. And I think that was all just self-inflicted stress. They're there to help you. They're there to make sure you're successful. And that was all just pressure and weight that I was putting on myself. And as soon as I got past that, and I think, there's always going to be some level of that's human. But as soon as I got past that and just realized that, I was a part of this group. I wasn't a student that was trying to prove what I knew to a preceptor. I was part of a group that was there to be a team member. And a lot of that self-inflicted stress seemed to go away. But talking with other people, I feel like that's a pretty common occurrence. You just have those first couple of weeks, especially if it's a new place and, you don't know the charting, you don't know where pre-op is, you don't know where PACU is, you don't know what kind of orders they like for PACU, like all those things. Every little thing was a learning curve for me. And so I think especially those first, I'd say at least month, I just, like I said, I wasn't managing my stress well, I wasn't sleeping well. And every night you come home, you're preparing for the next day, just like you were as a student. And I will say it's finally starting to slow down. I feel like it's, I'm starting to enjoy it. And it wasn't all in vain. I didn't go to school for 3 years and think, I'm not trying to change careers or anything. So I just think it takes some time to get through that.
Yeah, I remember, Tanner, I think it was last summer. So we had about, 5 or 6 months left of school. And we were talking one evening about, man, I just can't wait until we're CRNAs. And I still remember this exact phrase you told me. You said, I can't wait until I'm just sweeping out my garage or cleaning out my garage some weeknight, and I have a whole full day of cases the next day. And I'm not even looking up anything, and I'm not even thinking about what cases I have the next day, because I'm not a student anymore. I'm a CRNA, and I know what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be doing my own plan. And I distinctly remembered you saying that. And I thought about that the first couple of weeks after I started working. I'm like, man, why can't I get to that point?
Yeah. I wouldn't say that I'm fully there yet, even still. So I remember having that conversation with you, and it just seemed like kind of this dream world of as soon as you graduated, everything was just going to be easy, and everything, like all the pressure of being a student, was going to be off. And I think it's more pressure.
Yeah, and not to scare any of you by any means, it's wonderful not to be a student. It's so wonderful because a lot of the burdens that we had as a student are not there anymore. But there are some different burdens, which just like the different phases of school, I remember talking about how each semester brought a different set of challenges. And thankfully, they were different because they were a change of pace, but each time they felt like a mountainous task that you couldn't complete. You wouldn't be able to get over that mountain. And then you did, and you went to the next phase, et cetera. And it's kind of like when you're first starting out working as a CRNA, you do have another mountain of challenges that you have to overcome just because it's a transition. It's not the same because when you're a student, I mean, I remember the last couple months, like I loved if my CRNA left the room. I just loved being on my own, doing my own thing. But there's a piece of you that also knows that it's not, the responsibility isn't solely on you as a student. I mean, you're working with the CRNA and then in most cases, an anesthesiologist as well. And it's more of a team anesthetic. And then I think the thing that stressed me the most all of a sudden was realizing how much of a co-pilot I was as a student, because I always knew in the back of my mind that if something bad does happen, there's another set of anesthesia hands close by from my CRNA that can step in and help. And I wasn't really necessarily taking risk as a student, but if I wasn't at the perfect timing to pull the ET tube in terms of increased risk of spasming or something like that, I would just do it because I wanted to keep my day moving, and I knew that if they did spasm, I had extra hands, etc. But now that I'm the man in the room, the solo person, that if they do start to spasm, I got to take care of it. Or if I don't have the patient positioned perfectly for induction and I can't get the airway and they're a difficult ventilation, I'm the one that's responsible for that. And I think that was the biggest added weight factor for me, was the extra sense of responsibility that I didn't really realize how much of a factor it was when I was a student, just simply because I did have that extra hands close by, even though I didn't want them. It's kind of interesting. I didn't want that CRNA as a student to be hovering over me. I wanted them to stand away. So it is a transition that took me a couple of weeks to get used to, was just the idea. I remember my first incident that I had, and I looked up and I said, okay, what do you guys do for this? They're like, it's whatever you want to do. Like, you're the one in charge. And that was the first time it hit me, like, okay, I'm the one that has to make decisions and the calls for these things, whether they're big things or small things. You're now the one that has the responsibility.
Yeah, I think something that I did probably even unconsciously in school, you would make a plan, but then you would, maybe you're at a new facility and you don't quite know how they're going to do this case. So I would structure my conversation like, okay, so we're doing a total knee. I would say, okay, my plan is to do a spinal with an LMA. What are your thoughts? And then the CRNA obviously knew you had thought through your plan, and they'd say, oh, it's fine. Here we usually just do, X, Y, or Z. And then I kind of got used to that crutch. And then when I was all of a sudden, now you're graduating, you're on your own, and there's nobody that's going to be like, oh yeah, well, we, typically do X, Y, or Z. It's your call. You got to make the decision. You got to feel confident in why you're making that decision. And so I think that was something that I didn't even realize I was doing. It was just relying on them to tell me, exactly what they would tend to do. And I think what ended up happening is I never really had a gut of like, this is what I like to do. And some of that is going to, is probably inevitable. You can't really you're going to have to conform to different places that you go to as students. So a lot of that will probably have to come as a CRNA compared to a student. But that was something that was eye-opening for me, was just like, nobody's gonna come over top of you and say, oh no, we do this, that, or the other. You have to, there's no, like Cole, you were mentioning, there's no one else that's going to ultimately be responsible. I think the flip side of that too, though, is, and I know you've experienced this just as we've talked through different scenarios, there are always people available to help you. And like I said, going back to that insecurity of feeling like you needed to prove yourself, I think probably the bad side of that is wanting to do things by yourself and not ask for help. But even where we practice independently, there are always CRNAs that are in between cases, or there's, other people that are available to help you, even if you just have, maybe a potentially difficult intubation and you just say, hey, do you mind just standing in there while we get this case started? Or this might be a difficult spinal. Do you mind just backing me up on this? Or if you do have, a problem in the OR, it's amazing where they will come from. And so I think while it is true, you feel that weight of being on your own, I think it's also encouraging to know that you do have support. And I think is important that you lean into that instead of trying to shy away and just, trying to prove something.
Yeah, that's a great point. I remember, well, first of all, so you use an LMA with a spinal for a total knee?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just do a MAC.
Yeah. You totally can, for sure. And that's just kind of the culture here. You just do a general with the spinal and get them to sleep with an LMA. I mean, it's basically the same thing, right? Like your MAC is probably closer to a general anesthetic than just like monitored anesthesia.
Interesting. See, difference of practice in different areas,
Yeah.
And
that's the thing. It's been totally, there's been so many things that I didn't train doing it, one way or another. But you just kind of adapt. It is fun. This is a quick story just from today, because this is the good. I feel like we're just telling you the reality of what our transition has been. And I just want people to know that it's okay if it's stressful, because I feel like that's what both of our experiences have been. And I didn't really know that from anyone else that said it was this stressful. And I felt like I was kind of, out of place. But now that I'm intentionally asking people these questions, it seems like it's way more common that people feel this stress during transition. But today was a little bit different. I had a case that was just going really, really well. I was actually doing a total knee with the LMA. And towards the end, while they were closing, I was just like I had charted everything. I had all my block meds pulled up, and I'm literally just like staring at a screen, just bored. So then I was like, well, why don't I just pull the LMA and then use mask straps and put a mask on them, and then just leave the gas on and have them breathe on a mask for the last like 20 minutes. And somebody came in to relieve me, and they're like, oh, do you typically, pull your LMA this early? And I was like, oh, no. I was just honestly kind of bored, and I was just curious, like doing it a different way. And that, to me, it's so fun. Like you always say, Cole, that anesthesia is as much as an art and a science, and we're obviously so new to this, and people probably that have years and years of experience could obviously run circles around us. But it's just fun that you can try different things, and there's a million different ways of doing it. And then as a CRNA, you get to choose that. If you want to do something differently, you can do it. You don't have to, run it by your preceptor or whatever. And I think, to me, that's the really fun part is, honing in what you like to do, different meds you like to use. So yeah, I think while I want to be very real about the stress that it also has been a ton of fun.
And that honestly brings up a really good point for another piece of transition. And that's not only are you trying to settle in more for your own style of doing things, just because you've had to change your plans so much for whatever preceptor you would have been with for the day as a student. Now, you're able to make your own plan, but at the same time, you're now trying to get accustomed and used to the different preferences of the surgeons you're with. Or if you're at a practice that has anesthesiologists who are either going to be medically directing or medically supervising you, it changes, based on their preferences, what you do. And it's just learning all of those. So for example, at my practice, I have a supervised system with an anesthesiologist. And then there's just a lot of different surgeons. I haven't even come across all of them yet. I work at a level 1 trauma center where we have so many different places they send us in the hospital that for me, it was just going and experiencing for the first time all these different places. There's a whole separate part of the hospital that just does a ton of GI cases for the day, a big cardiac area, cath lab area. You're doing MRIs for kids and CTs and IR. You're doing your main area. And it was just so spread out that it just took a while for me to get to all these places. And I never wanted to get to the point, and I still don't, where I am uncomfortable doing something. I remember when I graduated, I loved taking care of peds patients. Loved it. I thought it was such a fun thing. I know a lot of people don't like peds whatsoever. And it was simply because I was used to taking care of peds by the end of our schooling, because I had purposely put myself in a lot of those rooms so that I felt comfortable with it. But it is interesting how fast you become uncomfortable with something like that. And so I just had to take care of my first pediatric patient in months, and it was a little 2-year-old. And it was interesting how nervous I was for it, just because I hadn't experienced it in a while. And I don't want that necessarily. And so I'm telling the schedulers, put me in the different variety of things at a rotational basis, so that I don't become uncomfortable with them. I want to be comfortable taking care of a pediatric patient. I want to be comfortable taking care of a very sick cardiac patient, et cetera. And I want to see those different things. But that added a whole nother level of uncertainty for me, was just the idea of, okay, I typically would do an LMA for this case, but I haven't done it with this surgeon yet, or this anesthesiologist. And I don't know, is the culture here the same for what I would do? Should I do an LMA, or would I get looked weird upon? And if, as Tanner said, I didn't want the impression of, okay, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, either A, because I'm asking too many questions, or B, because I do something that's out of the ordinary or out of the culture of what's typically done there. And obviously that just takes time. You have to experience it once or twice, and then you see how things are ran and you become more comfortable with it. So for me, it took about 2 months, I would say, to kind of experience all the different areas, just because there were so many different places to go to. But really, once I was able to go to each thing for the first time, then I knew what to expect going forward.
Yeah, again, I feel like that is just like the normalcy of being uncomfortable when you're starting out at a new place, because you don't know preferences. You don't know how they typically do things. You don't know, for me, even the charting was different. And so there's just a lot of, like, every day there's, especially starting out, there's no just like sweet spot where you just settle in. You're like, oh, this is familiar, this is comfortable. Honestly, a lot of that is probably the anesthesia. Like, the anesthesia is the easiest part of your day most times, because you're just still trying to learn different colleagues, trying to learn, the surgeon preferences, learning how the flow goes. And so, those are all challenges and uncomfortable. And I don't really know of any other way to make that better, other than just, as the more you do it, the more you see things. And I'll continue to go back to what I said at the beginning. I feel like a lot of the struggle is self-inflicted, where you're just worried about what people are thinking of you, or worried that, they think, why is he slowing down the surgical schedule? And it's simply because maybe you don't even know the flow of getting from pre-op to the room. Does the nurse go get them? Do I need to go there and bring the patient back? Those are just little hiccups that you'll go through one time, and exactly how that goes the next time. And then, you just move on through. And so I think, again, getting through the challenge of putting that stress on yourself was a big deal for me. And now things have started to slow down quite a bit. I think the other major thing that we wanted to talk about for starting out as a CRNA, I know we have talked mostly about the clinical side of things, but I think just briefly we'll talk about home life and finances and how all that was switching over. Talk to a lot of different students who have recently made the switch to practicing as CRNAs, and the gap between when you are finishing school to when you actually start making income is a big deal. And for me, that was close to 4 months. You got to pay for your boards at the end of school. That's not cheap. And then now you got to figure out how you're going to live for those couple months before you actually start making income. And then it was like a month delay for me before I actually got my first paycheck. And so that was another thing that I just want to put on people's radars. I was thinking, as soon as I get started, I'll have 2 weeks and I'll have a paycheck, and then, you're, off and running. But it actually was even a little bit longer than that for me. And that could just be how our payroll works. Or, Cole, I don't know if you had a similar experience.
Yeah, I was like 3 or 4 weeks into, I think it was 3 weeks into working before I got a paycheck. And it was even a partial paycheck at
Mhm.
that point.
Right. So I think this is something that somebody told me recently is you can look at finding different credit cards that have good interest or deferred like repayment plans with them. If that's how you want to finance your couple months, it's not a bad idea. I've heard of people just taking more student loans towards the end of school, since those are going to be deferred payments anyways, that you can use that to fund your living in between that time. But I mean, I think it's kind of a catch-22 because you want to celebrate, you want to have a good time and have a good relaxing time after school. You've earned it. You've spent a good part of your life in school and working really, really hard. And when in your life again are you going to have just, like 2-3 months off? So I think there's a balance where you're really wanting to enjoy that time, enjoy the rest, and go and do things that you couldn't do other times because you don't have that much time off. But then you're also probably strapped financially and need to make sure that you're not digging yourself into a major hole before you can actually start getting paid. So for us, yeah, it was just kind of living simply, and we for sure enjoyed our time off, but we just tried to kind of lay low. It is nice now that you're making a paycheck, seeing money coming in instead of just money continually going out. And yeah, it is worth it. It is.
So nice to have a
Yeah,
paycheck.
it is so
So
nice.
nice.
Yeah,
And when I look at the paycheck compared to what I was working in the ICU, it's like, okay, this is why, not the only reason why I did the
right.
3 years of school, but it definitely is a very good perk to the sacrifice you had to make for 3 years,
For
for
sure.
sure. And it comes at least in my facility, every 2 weeks, it comes again and it comes again. And I'm like, man, it's just, it's a good profession. I go in waves, even with the initial few weeks of being stressed out for whatever reason. With the transition, I go through different waves of, okay, this is such a good gig. Like, I have such a good job. I'm getting paid very well to do something that I thoroughly enjoy. And yeah, it might be stressful at times, but the thing that is so rewarding, at least for me, about anesthesia is just that initial gratification. It's so immediate. You see the result right away of if you did a good job or even a bad job. And obviously you want more of those good initial feedbacks. The patient wakes up, it's a smooth emergence, they're comfortable and PACU. It's just almost this like this high that I get. I'm like, oh, I did a great job with anesthesia. And you go around to the next case and you do it. And you get a couple bad ones, right? And you learn from that and you grow from that. But it's just something that I just love and I enjoy. And then to see you get a paycheck that's a significant paycheck every few weeks, and it really adds up. It's so nice to get that after school. But I'm not going to lie, it is different than what I thought, for the fact that I always saw CRNAs when I was in school that are picking up a bunch of extra shifts. And I'm like, man, if I'm making as much as you guys make, I'm not going to feel the need to always have to pick up extra shifts to pay for things, because the amount of money we're going to make as a CRNA so much more than what I'm used to. And I can see why, now that I'm actually working, is because you automatically get used to the new salary that you're making. And the transition, I think, is so important of how you transition into that higher level paycheck. Tanner, you can elaborate on this more because I know we've talked about this, but in terms of setting yourself up for success right off the bat, with almost in the sense of not knowing that you're missing some money in terms of setting things aside prematurely on your paycheck, whether that be to retirement, student loans, etc., so that in a way it doesn't seem like you're giving that money up. You just get used to what the leftover money is from the get-go. Is kind of how I started off doing it, because that made a big difference. Because yes, we are making a lot of money, but we also have debt we got to pay off for school. At least most of us do. We have different things that you had to sacrifice the last couple of years that you need to catch up on. I know my wife and we had to catch up on a bunch of different things, just simple things that, you just let go for 3 years, and you just need to buy updates for things. And, it all adds up, and it's just, how do you do that in a mature manner and a professional manner that is going to keep you set up for financial success moving forward.
Yeah, we are by far not a financial podcast, but I do enjoy finance and I enjoy kind of thinking about these different things. I'm convinced, I don't think there's going to be another time in your life where you're going to have such a drastic change in pay as when you graduate. And I think especially that's exemplified in our career. You go from making no money in school, actually paying tons of money. And
Another
then
day, another dollar spent. That's what we used to
yeah,
always say in school.
get to pay for those lovely long days. So you're paying money, you're not making any money, and then all of a sudden you go to making a really good salary. And I'm convinced there's no other time in your life for most people that you'll have that kind of financial swing. And I think how you manage that swing is very important for the rest of your career. And this is just my little soapbox, but I feel like we do ourselves such a disservice in the nursing profession because we don't manage that change well. And then now all of a sudden we're having to pick up tons of extra shifts because we're trying to pay for all these really expensive things that we've bought or all these different subscriptions that we've paid for. And then all of a sudden now you're getting burnt out with the profession because you were never meant to work 6 full days. You were never meant to work, 70 hours a week. But you are required to do that to maintain, the certain lifestyle that you've created. And I think if we just manage the transition better, it is a lot of money, but then as soon as you start paying your bills, it's not crazy amounts of money. And so your lifestyle shouldn't, again, it's not financial advice. It's just my personal soapbox, shouldn't change all that much, especially starting out. And if you can manage that transition well, then you can work the days that you were meant to work. You can work your 40 hours, go home, and still have plenty of money left over. And again, not get burnt out. And then we have issues with staffing and finding people to fill jobs simply because I feel like we're overworking ourselves. But anyways, I'll hop off that soapbox. But I do think that managing that transition well is really, really important. And like Cole said, it's super nice to see a paycheck every 2 weeks. And for me, it's been helpful to get that money out of my hands for things like insurance and for investments and for, other things that you want to set aside money for to kind of build your future before you even see that money in your bank account. And then, you're not quite so high on the sticker shock of your paycheck because it's really, pared down by the time you actually see it. But that's just what's helpful for us. And again, take it or leave it. I know everybody's situation is very different and we're not going to begin to tell you how to, manage that or live your life. I know people have very, very different circumstances, but that's just what's been helpful for us. And, thought we'd mention it here.
So with that being said, there is a big perk. I don't want to beat a dead horse here and keep saying negative things about the transition because while yes, it is a transition and we don't want to shy away from the fact that it is a little bit stressful and that if you experience that when you graduate, you're not alone in that stress. We also don't want to give the idea that it's a horrible transition because it's not by any means. We think it's healthy that you have that stress because if you just came in completely overconfident in yourself and you have all this responsibility, that's probably more scary as a coworker to see a new person come in and have that type of attitude. I would be more concerned about the safety of things going on with different patients that they're going to be taken care of rather than having somebody that is more conserved, asking questions, feels the weight of the responsibility because it is. We're in a profession that has so much responsibility and there's a reason we get paid the amount that we do because of the responsibility that we have. Yes, a lot of our job is spent in the maintenance phase that other people may say is a very cush job, but we get paid what we do because we have the knowledge and the skills to take care of things when certain situations arise. And so that's why it is so nice and it's so wonderful to have this paycheck. And this is such a blessing to be able to at least provide for my family in the way that I can now. It's been awesome because my wife was able to become a stay-at-home mom now after I started working, and just to see how much happier she is being with the kids, it just makes me feel so gratified to know that we worked so hard to get to this point. And I remember she told me the other week, she said, I feel like, Cole, we finally made it. We finally made it to where we have dreamed so long about getting to this point, and it feels so good to get here. And so there are so many good things about being a CRNA, and we don't want to make it sound like it's a negative transition, because it's not. But we also want to make sure you're aware of the fact that it is a serious transition. That kind of leads me into one other part I want to talk about, unless Tanner, you had something to add to that.
I was just going to ask you, so when did you start there at your job? What was your start date?
I started February 10th.
Okay, so now it's May 16th. So you're looking at 4 months.
3 months.
So you're looking at three
March,
months.
April, May. We've been out of school for a little bit. Okay.
Yeah, just autopilot. So you're looking at 3 months, and I just think that I just wanted to point that out. Like you guys are just having a conversation of, you feel like you've made it. And Danny and I were talking about that the other day of like, oh, this is stressful, because I think you put so much weight on, as soon as you're done with school, you think all that stress is going to be gone and you've made it. And then here you are 3 months into your job, and you guys are finally having that conversation of like, okay, you're kind of settling into these new rhythms of your life, and you're more, at ease with work, and that has, pays dividends for your ease and life at home. So I think, again, I just wanted to point out that I think that's, at least in my experience, I'm still kind of in that getting settled in phase. So I obviously, we're just a sample size of 2, but we're both feeling that kind of prolonged discomfort while you're making the transition, but it does, from what I hear, settle back in. And this is why I wanted to just talk now, because you've been at it just a little bit longer than I have. So it's kind of nice to hear from two different perspectives. But yeah, I don't think that should be worrisome to somebody or nerve-wracking when you're freshly into a practice and you think, this is not what I anticipated or what I thought it was going to be. I think just with some time, things will settle in, and you'll start to find your rhythm.
Yeah, and that leads me into another point I want to talk about. And for me, it was about the 2-month mark. I was really starting to feel settled in. And then I had a period in a 1-week section where I had 2 or 3 different incidents happen to me that really opened my eyes to the idea of, okay, like I am responsible here if something goes wrong, and I need to know how to fix this. And as Tanner mentioned, there's always other anesthesia professionals around if you need help, and you can reach out to them. And I know that. But at the same time, you're the one that has to deal with it at the very beginning and try to minimize the complications that can arise. And so I actually had my first patient die on me. And I had one happen in school, but it was somebody that came from the ICU already, and we were trying to save them quick, and we just weren't able to. And that just had a different emotional effect on me, because, they were coming from the ICU, and I didn't feel like there was anything that we did wrong that caused that. And I've had a lot of deaths when I was an ICU nurse as well. But again, I felt like most of those patients were already very critically ill, and we were just trying to save them rather than have something happen that caused them to die. Whereas in this case, it was my first time having a relatively healthy patient come on the OR table. We were actually just doing a lap chole. I mean, one of the easiest bread and butter cases you can picture. And we were waking the patient up. The procedure was done, and the blood pressure was just railroad tracks for the last hour, just a little over 100 systolic. And all of a sudden I got one that came back at 50. As I was turning the gas down, they had just finished suturing. Drapes were already getting pulled down. I put in my oral airway already. I mean, I was getting ready to wake this person up. I'm like, that's weird. The pressure should not have dropped all of a sudden. So I gave a nice big dose of ephedrine and phenylephrine together, and I brought it back up to 90. And then all of a sudden the next pressure, boom, was 40 systolic. And at that point, my pulse ox went blank. And in my head, I'm like, this can't actually be happening. Like is the cuff just getting pinched? What's going on? And ended up having, I've never actually had to do this in school where I had to actually break open epi and give epi. But I, just trusted my gut. I'm like, I need to do this right now. I gave epi, ended up having to start CPR a couple seconds later because my end tidal dropped below 20 at that point. and the patient had stopped breathing. I was bagging because he was breathing on his own before this happened. Long story short, patient coded like 6 times over the next couple hours. We actually got him up to the ICU as he was coding again in transport. I mean, we went into the ICU room doing CPR on him, and it just traumatized me more so than I ever thought it would. And it kind of, at that point, I was really starting to get to the point where I was feeling settled in about the 2-month mark. And then I went through about a 2-week period after that where I was nervous, like really nervous to do another case afterwards, because I was just fearful that something like that would happen again. I don't know if it was simply because of how other people I thought viewed me. If I was the new CRNA and I had somebody die and it was just a lap chole, and was there something I did wrong? I kept going over in my head, what did I do during that case to cause this? Was there something I would have done differently, et cetera? And it messed with my head, not going to lie, for sure about a week. And then it's been a slow process from there, kind of getting that confidence back. And anytime I have like a low pressure come, it's almost like a PTSD, like, is this going to happen again? And I got to get to the point where, I have to have these plans in my head of what am I going to do when X, Y, and Z happens. But at the same time, I have to have confidence in the fact that I've been trained and I have the skills to be able to handle it when it does happen. And so there's that balance I feel like you got to have of the sense of responsibility to know now that you're the CRNA, that regardless of whether you're working at a place like Tanner works at, where you're an independent CRNA, or if you're at a place that I work at where you can have an anesthesiologist that's supervising you, that can come in for different situations that arise like that at a very quick manner. Whatever that may be, you still have to have the sense of responsibility. And I think that adds a lot of weight. And for me, that's been the hardest transition, is just the idea of now I have that responsibility so much more than I had in school. And with that, though, now that I've kind of come out of after that death, realizing that I didn't do anything differently that I would have changed, but it does help me learn. I grew a lot from that experience because, like I said, I did not experience that during school. So it was a big learning experience for me to see that from the viewpoint of being the one actually taking care of the patient, and just the emotional attachment that I had to that versus if I was just coming into somebody else's room that was experiencing that. And that really has changed and shaped how I practice. And I remember so many preceptors I had in school would have these weird quirks that they would have me do. And they would say, I just had some bad outcome happen earlier in my career, and I just do it this way ever since then because of that. And that honestly is the truth. I mean, your experience shapes your practice. And there's certain things that, I'm going to do a little bit differently because of that, or one or two other things that have happened since I've been on my own, just in terms of weird nuances that I'll do because I had a bad experience or a bad outcome. But that's something that's been the biggest struggle for me, in all honesty, has been the sense of responsibility, but also having the confidence to know that I am skilled enough to be able to handle those situations. And just because a situation does arise doesn't necessarily mean I'm a bad CRNA. And I think that's been the hardest part for me is the outcomes of my patients I've reflected on my abilities as a CRNA. And that's something that I've been wrestling with ever since, that death. And it's something that I'm finally really settling into now, is more of that confidence level, because we need to have that confidence. I mean, you can't be a timid provider. You have to be able to step up and do the things that need to be done when the patient needs things to have happen. So I don't know, Tanner, if you've experienced anything like that since you started, but that's kind of been, if I were to say the one big hurdle or the big transition piece for me, is just that added sense of responsibility for when complications arise, knowing, do I have the skill and knowledge set to be able to handle this when it happens?
Yeah, I just think it's a very different conversation that you're having in the room when you're no longer the student. And it's funny because the only thing that's changed from a month ago to now that you're practicing is you passing boards. Like you don't have a wealth more of experience between that time period that makes you this certified practitioner and you're ready to just handle things. And last month, people would have, called somebody else into the room and asked them questions of how to manage a crashing patient. And then now all of a sudden, a month later, they're asking you. And I think that's a sobering thought. But like Cole, you mentioned, like your gut instinct to break open epi and just start the process. We're trained for this, and you're trained to manage these situations on a much smaller scale. I was doing a trach and peg the other day, and very, very sick individual, and we're just having difficulty oxygenating the whole case. And I just remembered thinking while we were doing that case, like the whole conversation the entire time was between me and the surgeon about, if I need to have them stop and I need to have a little bit of time to go back up on my FiO2 and bag them up a little bit, and then they could start again. And I just remember thinking, like, as a student, sometimes you would have that conversation with the surgeon, but oftentimes it was the CRNA that you were with. If they were in the room, like, they would be actually having the conversation. You might still actually be doing the actual things, but they would kind of take over. And like I said, this is a very, very small situation compared to what you just talked about, Cole. But I just remember thinking in that moment, like, you're the one that is going to be responsible. You're the one now that needs to drive the decisions if you're going to proceed with something or not. You're going to be the one that, initiates that call for starting the code, starting compression, starting that whole sequence. So I think that there is just a sobering transition that happens. And yourself better than anyone else. You know that you really, you haven't changed since school. It's not like something magical happened and now all of a sudden you have, like I said, a wealth more of experience. But I do think that, you can rely on your training, rely on the hard work that you've put in, and you are capable, you are ready to take on those challenges. It's just a very sobering thing, I think, to know that now the responsibility lies with you. I think all in all, maybe this kind of sounds like, I don't think we were planning on making this sound so dreary, but
not at all.
I just want us to be very honest with how our experience has been. And I think oftentimes you get the social media cliff notes of people's experience, and, it's all cropped and framed perfectly. And this is just going to be the real deal of what we've experienced. All in all, I will say it is so worth it. Like, it is incredible to go to work, have a paycheck, have responsibility, have engagement with your, fellow coworkers as staff, and build relationships.
And they respect you finally now.
Yeah, you're part of the team.
Such a big key.
Yeah, part of the team. And I think that's huge. And for me, like, I enjoy getting to know people, getting to know their story, having a conversation when you walk in the morning and you say hi and you actually know that person, instead of being a student walking in and everybody ghosting you as you walk by, and as you say hi to them, they just look down because you're a student. They know you're going to be gone in 3 weeks. And like, there are so many positives and benefits. We just feel that you've probably heard about those already, and we wanted to give you kind of what our experience has been start to finish. So thankful to have the opportunity to be a CRNA. Thankful to be done with the journey of training, and excited now to be part of the profession. And I just want to reiterate that if you are feeling stressed, if this is where you're at in your career, I don't think that is something that should make you feel isolated or lonely. I think we all go through that, and just wanted to kind of share our experience here today.
Looking back, would you say, now that we're done with school and you're working, would you go and do it again? I always ask the CRNAs I was with that were precepting me, would you go back to school and do it again if you had to? I don't want to give you their answer until I hear what yours is.
Oh man,
because I know what it's going to be.
I probably shouldn't wait this long to answer. You know what? I don't think it's fair to, I don't feel like it's fair to ask me, because school is still so fresh. You know what I mean? I feel like if you ask me in even a couple of months, even already, man, I just think about daily the last 3 years. And I think with time, you forget about how much, you put into school, but the farther you get out from it, I think that seems like less and less of a big deal. But, oh man, I don't know that I would right now. I don't know that I'd go back and do another 3 years.
Because we're so fresh being done with 3 years.
Because we're so fresh. I'm beginning to love what I do for work. But yeah, that'd be a very big conversation. It takes a lot of belief.
That's the most common answer I always got from people was their job is the best job they could have ever picked. They absolutely love their job. I honestly have not talked to a CRNA that is not happy that they do what they do. Every CRNA I've asked this question to has said they love their job.
Yeah.
But almost every single one has said the 3 years of school was the worst 3 years of their entire life. Like I've even had somebody say that him and his wife call that the dark ages of their life, the dark years of their life. They refer to the school as the dark years. And I'm like, that is so true for me and my wife. It's a hard road. And I think for anybody listening that has yet to go to school, I just want you to be prepared that you need to have the support system to go through it, because it is a journey. I remember when I made my decision to be a CRNA, this was 7 years ago, and my wife and I set that goal and we worked all the way to get there. And it is definitely a journey. Now that we're here, by far, it is worth it. Like I said, it's just the other night, my wife said, I think we finally made it. Like it is such a gratifying feeling now to be at this point. And so it is worth it. I definitely say it is worth it. But again, Tanner, I agree with you. I think I'm still tired from the 3 years that we just went through, and I wouldn't just jump in right now to another 3 years if I had to keep this profession.
Right.
Not saying that I wouldn't do the original 3 years from the beginning if I was sitting there fresh. It's just the concept of I want people to know that it is a very challenging 3 years or however long your school is. But I definitely think it is worth it.
Yeah. And we're so new into the benefits of it too. Like we've not been able to experience all that CRNA life has to offer to the fullest. So I think that also plays into, while school is fresh, we also are we're brand new into the CRNA profession and haven't really settled all the way in. The last thing I'll say before we finish up, this is kind of a long wrap up, but we have talked over and over about finding your support system in school. You just mentioned that, Cole. And I think that is 100% the key to getting through school, is finding a group of people that can, encourage you. You can talk about your highs, you can talk about your lows, people that really understand exactly what you're going through. And what I'm learning is that it doesn't stop when you get done with school. And so I would still, rely on those relationships that you've made in school. Cole and I talk all the time about like, oh, this was so dumb. I did, this the other day in a case, or, I forgot about checking this. And you're probably going to be more guarded with those conversations with, seasoned CRNAs, but other new grads that know exactly who you are and, your experience and how you develop that friendship through school. Those are easy outlets to have those conversations with. And like we still call each other all the time and talk through our days, just because I feel like that is something that's really important that you still maintain even after school, because you're still going to have some of the same highs and some of the same lows, and finding a group that supports you in that, I think, is really important. Obviously your coworkers are going to be there to a large extent, but I just think there's something unique about people that you've trained with and are at the exact same stage of their career as you, to be able to talk about those things.
Yeah, the bond that I formed with my classmates is something that it's a bond unlike anybody or any bond that I'm going to have with anybody else in the rest of my life. It's just the experience that we had to go through together just kind of, it sets a whole different type of bond. And so like Tanner said, like I actually work with two of my classmates that graduated with us and work at the same facility. So it is so helpful to be able to ask them questions that, have you experienced this yet? Have you worked with this surgeon yet? How did that go? Just the little things make a big difference. So the support system does not just end when you graduate. Continue to bring that forward. So I hope this episode has been beneficial to you. Again, Tanner and I didn't want to make this seem like necessarily a negative talk, but we also want to keep it real. That's why we titled these episodes Real Talk. And that's because oftentimes, as Tanner said, that we can sugarcoat things and you see only the good side of things when you're looking at the life of other people. And we want to make sure you understand the reality that it's not completely going through the meadow. It's not like you cross the finish line of school and it's done, it's over. All your struggles are in the past. There are still hurdles to overcome, but it's so much more worth it. You have such a higher upside, so many more blessings, at least from the short couple months that we've worked. We've already started to see that. And so it is such a great profession. So stick it out, keep with it, no matter what stage of life you're in right now in your journey to become a CRNA, whether you're still in nursing school, whether you're an ICU nurse about ready to start CRNA school, or whether you're a student in school, or whether you've already out and you're going through the same stuff that we're going through right now. And that's the transition. Whatever stage you're in, just know that hurdle, you'll overcome it. There are always going to be the next hurdles to go through. So it's always something to continue to go and to overcome. But the beautiful thing is with each one that I have passed and things that I've talked with Tanner about, you just see how far you've come. We were just talking the other day about that we are so much further ahead, I think, compared to what we were last year. Even though you have a hurdle right now that we're going through, it's so fun to look back and see how far you've come. So just keep taking one step in front of the other. And again, get that support system. That is the biggest key.